Welcome back to the 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show. My name is Wayne Kimmel, managing partner of 76 Capital, the sports tech venture capital company. On this show, I interview top sports entrepreneurs, athletes, and executives who are shaping and many times changing the sports business industry. You can subscribe to our show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our 76 Capital website. Today, my guest on our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show is Mike Schreiber. Mike is the founder and now Executive Chairman of Playfly Sports and a venture partner here at 76 Capital. While at Playfly as the CEO, Mike completed more than 10 acquisitions. The employee count grew to more than 1,000 people. Playfly works with over 2,000 brand partners, which includes professional teams, athletic departments such as Auburn, LSU, Maryland, Michigan State, Penn State, USC, Villanova, Virginia, and Virginia Tech. Mike is truly a visionary leader and an innovator in sports, media, and the overall technology industry. And I'm really excited to discuss with him Playfly's latest fan score report titled Modernizing the Business of College Sports. Mike, welcome back to the 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Wayne. Appreciate it. And like the shout out to the Terps that you threw in there in the middle in our list of schools that we have here at Playfly.
Well, of course I had to, and of course UVA as well for you. So, that's how we do it.
Exactly.
Well, look, first, congratulations on building one of the most successful and influential companies in all of college athletics over the past 4 years. It's really been amazing. And while doing that, you had NIL, the transfer portal, NCAA lawsuits, and more. That has truly transformed the whole entire landscape. How did you build the company during this whole time?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and thanks for the intro there. That was great. I one of the things that really was the impetus behind Playfly was actually seeing all of this change happening. Not only did it start, a good 5-10 years ago, but it really, you could see the lawsuits picking up. You could see the movement and the change start happening. Even an impetus that was a big driver of the 76 Capital business, like the PASPA change in 2018, where sports betting was legalized. Even that change started to evolve how college sports was going to have to react. It's such a huge industry in this country. So I started thinking about all those changes, how they're going to affect the industry, and if we can build a company that can help address a lot of those changes. And that's what Playfly Sports has become, is the company that is addressing those changes. We are the largest revenue maximizer inside of the ecosystem of sports, pro, college, high school. We're now outside the US just starting. We made that move this past year. So our goal is to go in and help these organizations drive more revenue, to manage all of these changes. College is even more interesting because it's been an evolution that's changed from more of an administrator type model, administrating the sports, to a business leader type model. And a lot of the leadership in college sports has changed over. We've actually had the largest in changeover in athletic directors in the history of college sports over the last few years. So when you look at it 4 years back, 5 years back, when we started Playfly Sports, you're seeing major changes. You're seeing athletes getting paid for their endorsements, name, image, and likeness. You're seeing sports betting, as I mentioned before. You're seeing the transfer portal remove the 1 year wait. You're seeing opportunities for revenue shares off the college's revenues, so pay to play for athletes. You're seeing a crazy amount of change in recruiting via a retention model that is new to the model, right? First, it was just how do I get the athletes in? Now it's how do I get the athletes to stay? Whole different model. It's very similar to the corporate world, which is really interesting, and a foundation, which we'll get into, of the report that we put out there, which is you need to think like a company. You need to think like a media company. You need to use the learnings and the best practices for those types of companies, because that's now what an athletic director needs to focus on, and how they need to run the business side of their department.
Well, it's such this report that you guys put out at Playfly called your fan score report, modernizing the business of college sports. I mean, it is a really great and comprehensive report on everything that's happening across the industry. And also, I think what's interesting is you actually have put out some guidelines, some tips, ways so they can actually get through all of this and be successful. So, talk about some of the things. I mean, you talked about some of the, there's financial pressure now on these athletic departments. How has that playing out, and what can they do?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, the fan score report, actually, it's a continual series of reports that we get excited about pushing out interesting learnings that we get. We get to sit with most of the athletic departments in the country. We get to sit with most of the pro teams. So we release these reports on a regular basis to try to really help the rest of the industry. Because again, if all boats can rise with the tides, it's great for Playfly sports. So the other thing we do is we love data. So we really drive as much data, really understanding the fan, and that's why we call it the fan score. Really understanding the fan. A lot of times we're ranking how well each of the teams or departments are doing some of these things, which is kind of fun. But ultimately, it's the data. And that really drives this report, especially when you look at the foundation of the data. I'll just throw out a couple examples of data just for us here, just so we can get a sort of a lay of the land. For example, so college sports is a very unique element in the world, right? The US is very unique with college sports. There are a significant amount of more colleges that matter than pro teams traditionally in the US when you look at it across the board. But ultimately, the college ecosystem, even though they have year-round sports, even though they have 20 to 30 sports under their umbrella, and they have national fan bases because the college kids come and then they go back and spread themselves out across the country, they're still significantly undervalued. So when you think about all these new pressures and you look at it from a data standpoint, the NFL team on average makes about $580 million in revenue. The stats and the data for a college team, when you look at it from a football perspective, which really drives the majority of the revenue, when you look at the top 30-ish teams, they drive about $100 million in revenue. So you can see on average, so you can see the disparity there. And let's just break it down. Let's take one revenue stream. Let's just take sponsorship. When you look at sponsorship specifically, a Power Four team on average around little over $13 million in revenues for sponsorship. An NFL team makes 71, almost $72 million in revenue. So the disparity between a large college football program and an NFL program is huge. So that's an opportunity. We see that as huge growth opportunity because these brands are just as strong. These brands are just as old and tenured and just as many traditions as every NFL team out there. So there's just an opportunity. So that's what we do. We get on the ground. And that's a lot of what this report is about, is how to think more like a professional team, how to think more like a media company, how to drive those revenues, how to close that gap between the existing college data and what we're seeing coming from pro teams. We get to work in both arenas at Playfly Sports. We actually can bring those best practices down and start driving new strategies. And ultimately, it comes down to a really relatively, finite list of things to start thinking about. But building out, for example, I'll throw out a few of them just so we can throw them on the table and have a discussion about them. But building out a robust sales organization, thinking about your org structure, thinking about your compensation plans. Do you even have incentive comp? Do you have commission for your people, right? A lot of times in the college ecosystem, there's not a commission ecosystem or a compensation structure. So even those small things can change actually the dynamics of how your team operates and how you go after.
So Mike, but before you continue in a second, I want to ask you a quick question on that. I mean, maybe taking it up a level, just really talking about how athletic departments are constructed today or in the past, basically, and how they could look in the future. Because I think a lot of people are surprised at your number, $500 million, for the NFL, $100 million for college. Like, why is that? And how has it been done? And now what do you need to do to actually, you're going to get into some of these things. What do you need to do? But like, what is it like today? What does it look like?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So today's evolving. So we're in the middle of the evolution, right? And that's what Playfly Sports gets ourselves into. So I'll actually take a step back a few years because it already started to evolve. If you go back a few years, what it really looks like is most of the organizations in college sports had a model where they had the sports operations side, so the administrator, so who would manage each of the sports inside of the athletic department. They would have compliance departments. They'd have the coaching departments. They'd have all the different elements there. And then they would have something which they traditionally called external, still do, we'll call it external, which is really the focus on marketing, focus on communications, and the focus on revenue categories like sponsorship, ticketing, etc. There's also traditionally a foundation that drives donations from the community and usually notable alumni. But ultimately, that's the structure. Set up much more like a administration department at a university than set up like a business. So what historically has happened is a lot of that model has allowed for interesting evolutions in the commercial side of the business where it's been mostly outsourced. So mostly, for example, because of that structure, it's like, okay, well, let me go find the best person to do my sponsorship sales. Let me find the best person to help with the ticket sales. Let me find the best person to help me build out my website and apps, etc. So ultimately, that's how it's been if you look back a few years.
So, Mike, on that, you say best person. It's either best person or best company to help them build out those areas, right? So that's where, so there've been companies as well as doing it internally. So it's a little bit of both.
That's right. That's right. So, and then there's been an evolution over time, which is something that Playfly has helped a lot of schools do, is we actually take a whole team and we put them inside the department and they report into the athletic department. So some of our schools, we have 20 plus people that sit inside. They have the email addresses of the school. So that's a hybrid moment where you're looking at actually taking a full service and dropping it in. We do that both in sponsorship sales. We do that in ticket sales, where then you have this hybrid model where you have a whole new team of employees. They happen to be on our books, but they work for the school and the athletic department. So that actually gives the department a much more commercial and corporate view and look, which is a really interesting play. And that's been something that has been evolving more and more over time in the world of sponsorship sales, ticket sales, and other elements here. The next step is some partners have started to look at, can I just hire those people? And you're starting to see a wave of people hiring chief revenue officers and starting to think about how do I actually bring the people in-house to do this, and actually pulling some of those people from the pro ecosystem, which is really interesting. And that's really helpful too, because again, those people are going to start thinking commercially, and those people are going to start thinking how we can generate more revenue and use a lot of the strategies and offerings that are available to them, including that we offer at Playfly Sports. But ultimately, that's really valuable, is to bring in thought leaders, whether you hire them, whether you contract with them like Playfly, or whether you do that hybrid model where you sort of enlist a team to be put into the department.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I mean, and getting back to what you were saying earlier, I mean, this commercial innovation and revenue maximization opportunity today, right? So you start with, looking at the sales infrastructure, and then what are some of the other things that you can look at to really start to make things, hopefully get to that $500 million level, that we were talking about earlier.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things we talk about a lot is data and insights. So the interesting element when you think about the fan bases of college is they're really not activated in the way they can be today. So thinking about your fan base, proper data hygiene, data warehousing is sort of the foundation, but really the activation is the important part. How do you use the data? How do you activate it? You can use it for everything: sponsorship, ticketing, donation increase, activations. You can use it for marketing. You can use it for social media enhancements. You can even think about it from a perspective of using it from an NIL focus, when now the athletes can make money. Okay, well, how do we get and how do we deliver their message and their new offerings out to the fans? So using all of these databases and these data activation models is something that really hasn't matured yet in college sports. So that's something that we help schools with, and it's really a competency that we recommend every school, whether they work with us or not, really dives into understanding not just the data hygiene and making sure you have the data, but how you use it. That's the most important element, because if you're not using it to its fullest value, then you're really doing a disservice to your program. So I would say that's one. Another one is real estate. Interestingly enough, when you look at a college campus, there's a lot of land. And when you think about being the proximity to the stadium or having a opportunity to be close to the athletes, fans want that. So thinking about hospitality, whether it's on game day or non-game day, is really interesting. Thinking about builds that are adjacent to the campus that have real estate elements that could help fund elements to the athletic department. There's a whole bunch of different offerings there. We actually throw a lot of fan fest opportunities for our partners, where we create a festival basically outside of a game day experience to create, and it draws obviously not only significant fandom and excitement from the fan base, but it draws new revenue streams that they wouldn't have had before. So there's a lot of really interesting things around facilities, hospitality, and real estate that haven't fully developed. And again, you need to spend the time, you need to have the right people, you need to have the right partners and dive into those things. But that's more thinking like a company than it is thinking like a sports administrator. So it's a really interesting element to start breaking through some of those elements and diving in. Another one is just new events. For example, programming, right? Let's program the venues when they're not being used, right? You can program them with youth sports. There's so many people looking for facilities. You can program them with concerts and drive new fan-based elements. You can drive even I'll throw out a random one. You know, like a magician that comes to town, right? They drive fandom. They bring audiences. So there's interesting ways to do it. It sounds some of these sound a little odd for a sports-oriented department to go focus on them, but in essence, they drive revenue that's going to pay for all the great activities in sports and allow us to keep the 20 to 30 sports that all the departments here service today. So these are important elements to dive into and shouldn't be ignored. So, you know, a lot of departments, there's some great examples of departments that are doing this. Huge concerts thrown just recently over the last year at Texas A&M in the football stadium, which is kind of a cool thing to see. Penn State has had amazing concerts at their basketball arena out in State College. So there's a lot of schools that are making the move here that are doing it in a way that's really smart. So we think there's a lot of opportunity in that space. But just a few examples of ways to focus on this. But ultimately, thinking about that fan engagement is going to drive the model the most.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating what you're saying. I mean, it's this, you know, and you talk about in the report, in your Playfly fan score report about establishing a media company mindset. You mentioned that a little bit earlier. Maybe expand upon a little bit on that. I mean, this idea of acting like a media company, acting as like more of a corporation. I mean, like it's these ideas, but how does a athletic department make that leap and that change?
That's a great question. If you think about the core of a media company is really their IP, what they're developing, what they're creating. Is it a TV show? Is it a sports event? What is the IP that they own and they distribute? And then it's about audience. Again, audience are fans. So fans are audience, that equals. So, and then it's about audience. How do you drive audience, right? Because all of a media company's revenue comes off of that. Amazing IP and amazing audience. You put those together. When you think about the business side of an athletic department, you think about, okay, we need to drive fans. And then we need to drive fans off of our athletes and our games and our experiences. That's our IP. So in essence, it's the same thing. You have the same ingredients that come in. It's you have audience and you have IP. So to be able to drive value, you should look at media companies and those experiences, and they take really interesting elements and put them together. So that's obviously in terms of how you talk to your fans, using digital platforms to speak to them, using content as marketing. Content is one of the most valuable vehicles in all of marketing, not just in sports or media, all of marketing. Using content to tell a story, using content to create a offer, using content to work with a brand to create branded content that looks like storytelling, but also has a brand story inside of it. Using content to drive a fan excitement, think about like sizzle videos or excitement videos for the next game. These are all ways to use content, but ultimately underlying that content, even though it's great storytelling, is marketing, and you're driving that fan base. So media companies has perfected this. Pro teams have started to do this a lot. And some athletic departments actually are leading the way here, but doing more and more of that is really important. Looking at how to drive audience, how to drive fan base, using your platforms. Make sure you have the most advanced digital platform. So if you think about it, is a website a website? No. Is an app an app? No, right? So you can have the vanilla version, or you can have the most enhanced version that's pulling data in, that's engaging, that's driving new experiences, that has heavy video experiences. And those are things that you need to invest in. So they don't come lightly, but ultimately they have long-term value that comes back. Yeah,
and the report also talks about this, the concept of the one-to-one connection, right? And how you can do that and how important that is.
That's right. That's right. So you can actually have a dialogue. The interesting thing is, if you go back to the broadcast world that we were in 20 years ago, it was one to many. You were talking through one to many vehicles. Obviously now the internet, social media, and now even sort of generative AI experiences like chatbots and different things, you can have these one-on-one experiences that you've never had before, where you can actually talk back to the coach or the fan or the commentator and actually have a conversation. And that conversation is something that is invaluable to the fan and drives tons of word of mouth. If you think about it, one fan that has that interaction is going to go tell 10 of their friends. So it has a viral and exponential element there. So thinking about that and using the platforms that drive that, again, techniques of a media company, but using platforms that drive those types of discussion. Obviously, social media, thinking about how are you using social media. A great example, let's throw out TikTok, right? There's a lot of people saying, oh, we use Facebook, we release on Instagram. Do you use TikTok? Do you use some of these other platforms that are very sort of oriented towards the virality and youth as well?
Well, it's interesting, wearing our 76 Capital hats. I mean, it sounds like you're talking about the entrepreneurial mindset, right? Like bringing that to the college athletic world.
Yeah. It's funny. We actually call it the enterprise mindset. So very similar to the way at 76 Capital we use the entrepreneurial mindset. We call it the enterprise mindset because it really is thinking about all these elements as a business, and it's relatively new to the athletic world. And there's some amazing athletic directors that are leaning forward and so innovative. We love working with the most innovative leaders in the industry. It's just a change. But I would say, think about all these ways you can generate revenue. Think about the entrepreneurial mindset, and then be innovative around fan engagement. Fan engagement is going to be the key, right? The media companies think about their audience all day long. So there needs to be someone in athletic department thinking about their fan base all day long.
In the report, you talk about something called a commercial sidecar as a potential solution. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So there is a strategy. It actually got a little bit more of a footing in Europe with some of the soccer clubs, because a lot of the soccer clubs are owned by the communities in Europe. So they're not owned by a big corporation or what have you. They're owned by the actual fans or the communities or the local municipality. So what they did was to try to create and generate more investment income. They created a sidecar that housed their rights. To do that, they then ultimately moved their rights over and created an investable vehicle to drive more dollars back into the marketplace. This is something that if you have as I mentioned, an enterprise mindset, you can start to think about. We're actually working with a number of schools to help think about this concept and develop this sidecar. So it's a really interesting element that can drive invested capital that grows over time, just like any pro franchise would, right? And people can invest in, you can build all elements off of it. You can even have employees of it. You could have equity off of it. You could have a whole bunch of different elements that drive. And, ultimately, what if the next coach that gets hired gets some equity in in a vehicle that's part of the university? How cool would that be?
That would be amazing. Really amazing to think about those types of things. I mean, look, I love this, enterprise mindset and what you're really pushing out there right now across the college athletic world. I mean, look, so many people say NIL, and, break it all down, maybe give some examples of what are some of the most successful ways that, athletes themselves have been able to really take advantage of their name, image, and likeness.
Sure. Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, and we have some of the stats again. Love anytime we're talking about fan score or Playfly, I love talking stats. But since 2021, there's been a 50% increase we'll just talk football, FBS football transfers. So think about that. I mean, that is an amazing amount of new work that needs to be done by a football team and their administrators to manage that much movement. So when you think about that, you think about what's driving that. It's not just I want to go to a different school. A lot of times it's the NIL opportunities that's driving that move. And it's turning into a marketplace. And when a marketplace starts perfecting, you start seeing the participants in the marketplace increase their usage of it. So, and that's what's happening, right? So we're perfecting a marketplace, whether we like it or not, the way it's working. So, and whether the deals are sort of full traditional marketing based or more collective based deals, right? We're also seeing both, right? So I'll explain both sides for a minute, right? So one, when you see a true brand come in and look and work with a partner, an athlete, you're seeing really interesting new ways to expand. You're going to see it actually, we're, right on the cusp here of March Madness for this year. You're going to see a lot of advertisings with athletes, college athletes in their uniform. So that's interesting. That type of thing, that means not only is there a large compensation flowing back to the athlete for their name, image, and likeness, and their participation in the ad, but you're also seeing the brands for the schools, which is really interesting. So the brands for the schools are being used, which means the school is getting compensated for the use of their brand, which is really interesting. And
so
then,
Mike, on that point, real quick before, so in the commercial where the kid shows up to pick up his girlfriend and he's wearing the Duke shirt and everyone in the house is wearing UNC shirts,
yeah,
and they say, I guess he wore the wrong thing. He walks away. The schools are getting paid for that?
That's correct. Yeah. So the best case is when it's the athlete getting a nice NIL deal, the school's brand shows up, they're getting paid, and the actual brand, the marketer who is creating the ad, is getting the value behind it to drive their products, right? If it's a quick serve restaurant, or if it's a whatever, a car brand or whatever it is, they're getting value. So I call that a triple win, right? And when you can create those triple wins, those are amazing. So we try to do that. You'll actually see, we have a great example coming up. I don't want to give too much away on the LSU women's basketball side, but you'll see during this Final Four, but March Madness. But there's so many great examples of these triple wins, and we love to help at Playfly because we can control and manage how the mark gets used from a commercial perspective, and we can help find those advertisers who are interested, and then also connect them to the athlete at the same time and create those triple win experiences. So that's more like a traditional deal. But then there's the collective deals. The collective deals are probably the highest volume that are out there at the moment, and that's where an organization set up by donors creates a vehicle that basically offers an NIL deal for name, image, and likeness for endorsement by the collective. It's a separate company, usually an LLC that's created, and that company endorses an athlete. And those deals are interesting as well. They can come in all different flavors, sizes. Probably the biggest example is Michigan quarterback getting paid $10 million by a collective group that pulled him from committing to LSU. We're back to LSU again here, but committing to LSU to come to Michigan using a major endorsement deal coming out of a collective. So that's a really interesting strategy. Again, creating a market, and as the market gets more efficient, whether it's sort of a brand-based deal, like I mentioned on TV commercials, or it's a collective-based deal, it is creating a market that's allowing these athletes to get compensation. And ultimately now there's the NCAA has started working and developing as the settlement comes through here with a group to provide a clearinghouse to allow sort of approvals of deals and how they should fit into each university's cap, which now will come into play after the settlement's ratified here. But and that's a whole nother strategy, is what deals fit into the cap and what deals don't. And how do you manage that? So a lot of universities now are having to pull in sort of cap management type executives, which sort of a lot of times come from the GM ranks of the pro teams.
Yeah, that's certainly been fascinating. I mean, in the idea of sort of the direct pay, which is now, potentially looks like that's what's going to happen. But we will all see what happens with the House decision coming up. I mean, we'll have to do this again. I mean, because things will change over, right after, what is it? The announcement potentially is before the championship game of the Final Four, men's game.
Yeah, potentially. That's right. Yeah, the things could move around a little bit and change, but yeah, that we've learned. Well, I guess the one thing is, you just said it. The one thing we know about college sports in the last 5 to 10 years, the one thing that's clear and constant, that's always going to be the case, is it's going to change. It's going to change. Don't get comfortable, unfortunately, right? And that's the benefit of having a partner like us at Playfly Sports, because we get to see all the best practices in high school and pro and college, different levels of college, the top of the top, as well as the mid-majors, as well as some of the smaller schools. We get to see all the best practices. So the one thing we know is tomorrow is going to be a little different in college sports. So we got to figure out how to manage that, and we got to figure out how to be ready to deal with it. So that's what we have fun doing, is helping all of our partners succeed in that world of uncertainty, because that is the one constant in college sports, is that it's going to change.
Well, Mike, it's been awesome having you back on our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show. I really think what your team at Playfly with the fan score report, modernizing the business of college sports, is amazing. I see you have it in your hand there. I mean, it's pretty amazing that you do this, and it's great for the industry overall. I mean, this idea of embracing the enterprise mindset, maximizing your revenue potential, enhancing fan engagement. It's what it's all about. And so if you're a athletic director, or you're involved in this world, how does someone get their hands on this report and get in touch with your team at Playfly?
Great. Yeah. Thanks for teeing that up. So the report's available. It's in my hand here. As you can see, the report's available at playfly.com. So head over there and check it out. It's in our thought leadership section on the website, and you can download it and spend some time with it. And if you want to dive into any of the categories, feel free to reach out. There's contact information on the site to our team, and we're happy to connect you to the right folks to help discuss any of these topics. Thinking about the SideCar, thinking about how do you maximize revenue, think about how do you redo your rate card. Innovation, actually, we didn't hit. I'll land on that. Innovation, bringing in new technologies. A lot of times at Playfly, we'll work with 76 Capital. We've worked with Shot Tracker. Think about how you can track the fastest player on the court, right? And then create a sponsorship. New inventory creation is something that we did in partnership with 76 Capital and one of their portfolio companies, Shot Tracker. So think about those things. If that's something you're interested in, whatever it might be, happy to help, even if it's just a chat and figure out how to commiserate on the constant changes in college sports. Happy to do that as well. So appreciate it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Happy we got that innovation piece in. And do we leave anything else out, Mike?
I don't think so. I think that was it. And, I would say also, just innovation wise, just, on the 76 side, I am a venture partner with Wayne, and there's a lot of innovation there happening around a number of different elements. They're investors in a lot of in sports betting compliance with the U.S. Integrity, the
IC 360.
IC 360, sorry, the new name from the U.S. Integrity, which is a product that most colleges and conferences are using. The baseball and softball technology from Diamond Kinetics could be really interesting as innovation in the college space. There's a lot of interesting elements that could find some innovation using some of the technology from the 76 Capital portfolio companies. So
well,
I'll plug back to you on that, Wayne. There you go.
I appreciate that. I mean, look, you've done a heck of a job at Playfly. It's amazing now, having the role as executive chairman. Love having you as a venture partner with us at 76 Capital. Always looking for the next new and innovative thing that we can do together and build. Because as you said, the one constant is change. The one constant is that there's just so much opportunity across the sports industry today. And if you have this enterprise entrepreneurial type mindset, you really start to think about what can possibly be done, you can do it. And this is the time to do it. If there's ever been a time, right now is the time to really go out there and make things happen across the industry. So again, thanks so much for joining us on our show, Mike.
You got it. Thanks for having me. This was a ton of fun. I appreciate it, Wayne.
On behalf of the entire 76 Capital team, thank you for joining us for this edition of our Sports Leadership Show. Please remember to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast network or on the 76 Capital website. You can also explore the hundreds of episodes we've produced over the past several years on those same networks. And as always, go out there and make it happen.